Kines 310, Brian Campbell here. This is a micro lecture by request. I told you guys that I'd be more than happy to do this if you let me know. Fall 2021, how you doing? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to kind of go over, with the help of my buddy, let's see, what can we call him? What was from the Goonies? One-Eyed Willie. I got to get him a patch, but One-Eyed Willie and his rich stuff. So we're going to talk about today the upper extremities version of the ankle, the elbow, and that is the wrist, the radio-ulna joint, and the elbow. Okay, so this would be like the knee, this would be like the ankle, and the radio-ulna joint's pretty special because we do different things with our upper extremity and our lower extremity, so it needs to be designed a different way. Okay, so we'll start off with the basics and then we'll work into function. Remember, in terms of motion, position of any joint in the body, where are you at is your position. Just like where are you at? I'm in Houston, I'm in Lake Charles, I'm in Lafayette. Where are you at? Where are you going is different than where are you at. However, where are you at helps to infer where are you going. Okay? So, as an example, the wrist, where are you at? I'm in anatomical position. Where are you at? I'm flexed. Where are you at? I am extended. Where are you at in combination with where did you go infers how you had to move to get there. I started in an extended position. I finished in a flexed position. How did I have to travel to get there? I had to have wrist flexion. Okay? First exam stuff. So the wrist is an ellipsoid joint. It has sagittal plane motion in the fetal, out of fetal, flexion, extension, and it has frontal plane motion, ulna and radial deviation. Radius is always thumb side, ulna is always pinky side. Here's your radius, there's your ulna. Radius is going to rotate about the ulna. And then you have all these little carpal bones. Remember these guys from anatomy? Scaphoid, lunate, pisiform, triquetral, trapezoid, hamate, capitate. So the key thing here, though, is that the wrist joint is literally the scaphoid and the lunate kind of moving about the radius and the ulna, okay? So these little crumply bones, they don't summate a lot of motion. Really, they're there as to absorb shock as short bones, landing on your hands or when you're lifting, pushing, having these bones that could kind of absorb pressure. If that was just one solid bone, they would break anyway. That's one way to look at it, like a graham cracker that breaks into a bunch of pieces. So you have all these little pieces that could kind of dissipate force as we transfer a lot of force from the palm to the forearm. Okay? So flexion, extension. The key thing here is follow the fingers. The fingers, these little hinge joints, okay? All these little interphalangeals are hinges. Your knuckles are condyloids. You're not going to be responsible for the test, but they do two different things. But at the end of the day, finger flexion, extension. So think about it. Flexion gets you in the fetal, right? So my fingers are in flexion. My fetals are in fetal. My fingers are in fetal. Say that 5 times. Fingers in fetal, fingers in fetal, fingers in fetal. Regardless of what I do to my radio-ulnar joint, my fingers are still in fetal. What that tells me is that it doesn't matter if I'm supinated or pronated. The fingers are going to kind of follow the front part of the wrist, right, as the radius wraps around the ulna. So follow the fingers. Fingers into flexion, and then the wrist is going to follow the fingers into flexion. Extension, the wrist is going to follow the fingers into extension. So that's a good way to check to make sure, because if I'm in anatomical position, flexion is going to look like this. But if I'm pronated, flexion is going to look like that. That's why we don't use global references. Wrist flexion is when the hand goes forward. Yeah, until I pronate and then the hand goes back when I flex. Don't do those things. Don't do those things. Okay? Motion is not globally referenced. It's locally referenced. Okay, so follow the fingers. That's a good rule of thumb. Pun. So the Radio-Ulna joint. So here's the head of the radius. It's built like a clock. It's going to rotate approximately like pure rotation, but the bone kind of contours around and it's actually going to wrap itself over. So they actually call this the proximal radio-ulnar joint, this the distal radio-ulnar joint. So one way to look at it is this is more pure rotation and this kind of orbits the ulna. The distal kind of orbits the ulna. And then all of the carpal bones go along for the ride. Okay. My analogy in my lecture is you're in bed, this is your head, this is your feet. You wrap yourself around your pillow. Your head is going to stay in its place, but your legs and your body is going to wrap yourself if you had a hugging pillow. Okay, so this got its name not from some silly soup bowl, from the act of being prone or being supine. So you think of being supine as laying on your back. Well, supine position, eyes looking forward, laying forward. And then if you go prone, you roll over on your hugging pillow. Pronation, the act of going prone, the act of going supine. Pronation, supination. So again, the wrist doesn't twist. I say that in my lectures for those of you that are watching those and not falling asleep. Yay. The wrist doesn't twist. It's so tempting to say this is wrist motion. But we can't have the wrist twisting around like this. You know why? Because we have so many nerves, vessels, the wiring that crosses into the wrist for our intricate little detailed motions of our fingers is insane. Everything needs to stay in its little grooves, its little tunnels. You can't have the wrist twisting around like a balloon animal. That would be a bad day. So what's our trick to reposition our grip and to have functional circle of grip without twisting the vessels? Move the whole darn thing, vessels and all, with the radio-ulna joint. See that? Okay, so this is not happening here. This is happening there. If this was happening at the wrist, you wouldn't see my forearm. You wouldn't see the sleeve move because it's literally happening here. Okay, the wrist doesn't twist. So the wrist has flexion extension, ulnar radial deviation, the elbow has flexion extension, and then the radio-ulnar joint has pronation and supination. And all of these things can work together to make sure you can get these little fingers in infinitely many positions in your functional bubble of reach. Okay. Now, what are some landmarks to help figure out radio-ulnar position? Well, let's look at the limitations and maybe we could find some clues there. So the thumb will always be radial side, always, unless you have a really bad day. The thumb is going to be radial side. So radius is always going to be lateral side because look, even when I do pronation and the feet go medial, the head is still lateral. That's big for clues. Whose clues? Stop being such a dad. Pronation, supination. Radial head always lateral. Thumb always on the radius. So if the thumb goes medial, you must be pronated. And if the thumb goes lateral, you must be supinated. Well, what if the thumb is midway? Well, if it's midway between lateral and medial. That means it's lining up with the bicep, right? That's the brachialis origin right there, but it's midway. We call that semi-pronated. The reason we don't call it semi-supinated, anatomical position is all the way supinated. So the only way to go is in the direction of the road of pronation. That's why we call it semi-pronated. If this was anatomical position, we call this a semi-supinated position. So you follow the thumb. Where is my thumb? If I do some crazy scenario and you're like, oh, it's crazy. Nah, where's the thumb? Here's my thumb, this little piggy, and it's medial. That means I must be prone, okay? If I do this, I'm pretending like I'm chewing gum. I don't know what it is, maybe a nervous tick. Where is my thumb? My thumb is lateral. Oh, I'm in a supinated position, okay? Where are you at? Where did you go? How did you have to move to get there? Super duper simple. Super duper simple. So look for the clues. Follow the thumb. The part of the yellow brick road will be played by the thumb. Just follow the thumb. Follow the yellow brick thumb. Follow the yellow brick thumb. Supinated. It doesn't matter what position I put my wrist. I might try to trick you, right? Trick you. I might be like, what's that? Wow. No problem. Follow the thumb. I go from lateral. Oh, I'm supinated. To medial, I had to have pronation. Wrist position does not affect radio-ulna joint motion. Radio-ulna joint position doesn't affect wrist motion. Neither of them affect elbow motion, and none of them affect shoulder motion. So we have to remember the wrist can only do 4 things. The radio-ulna joint can only do 2 things. The elbow can only do 2 things. The elbow and the radio-ulna joint live in the same apartment complex, but they are in different rooms. They do 2 different things. Ulna moving about the humerus, radius moving about the ulna. Cool. Hope this helps. See you guys for your exam on Wednesday.